Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to today's edition of the Trump Revolution Report. News of the Trump Revolution featuring Ivo Fisick, your friendly but revolutionary underground reporter. Today's date is February 5th, 2017, day 17 of the Trump Revolution. On this episode, we'll talk Court Betrayal, Senate Leader Betrayal, Bernie's Berns, killers join anti-Trump crowd, and finally, we'll deconstruct a Congressional Call of violence against the Trump advisor. And now, here's our top story for this show. Trump travel ban suspension not lifted by federal appeals court. A federal appeals court today, February 5th, 2017, denied a request by the Justice Department to reinstate the travel ban. The appeal is in response to a suspension placed on the travel ban by a Seattle federal court judge last week. The administration claimed the activist Seattle judge overreacted by second-guessing the president on national security. Acting Solicitor General Noel Francisco said during the appeal, "The power to expel or exclude aliens is a fundamental sovereign attribute delegated by Congress to the executive branch of government and largely immune from judicial control." We covered the activist judge that was, well, the one that triggered the events here, and this was U.S. District Judge James Robert. Now we want to clue you in on something about this faux judge. He ruled Friday against the Trump travel ban, claiming that the suits brought by Minnesota and Washington attorney generals were, quote unquote, likely to succeed. Well, this is the same judge that declared that Black Lives Matter. During one of his recent rulings, he went into a whole anti-police rant in which he suddenly declared that Black Lives Matter. He's another activist, socialist judge who's absolutely no business whatsoever in participating in legal matters in which the Constitution is the law of the land. So apparently it hasn't been released yet exactly why the Federal Appeals Court ruled the way it did. I'm wondering if this might be a time when the Trump presidency, because Donald Trump is kind of a go big or go home kind of guy, may simply tell the courts, "We don't care. We're just going to ignore whatever you say because you have absolutely no jurisdiction in this matter." And one could argue that they don't have any jurisdiction in this matter. So we'll see what happens, and we will follow this story as it develops. Senator Mitch McConnell has signaled that he won't support President Trump's voter fraud investigation, claiming that voter fraud investigations happen at the state level. This just goes to show that there is still work to be done, rooting out progressives from not just the Democrat Party, but also the Republican Party. Here is more on what he said.
"This sort of thing is handled at the state level, and the Democrats always claim there's no election fraud at all. That is, of course, not true. Election fraud does occur. There's no evidence that it occurred in such a significant number that would have changed the presidential election, and I don't think we ought to spend any federal money investigating that. I think the states can take a look at this issue. Many of them have tried to tighten their voter rolls, tried to purge people who are dead and otherwise not eligible to vote, and I think we ought to leave that at the state level."
Well, we tried to tell the Kentucky voters back in the Kentucky primary when he was running against Tea Party candidate Matt Bevin that Mitch McConnell is a weaselly progressive troll who has spent far too much time in the halls of power. And this latest escapade just goes to prove that we were right. Sadly, Bevin did not beat McConnell. Instead, McConnell lived to troll another day, and here you see him trolling once again. After a report which we uncovered, which shows by progressive numbers that at least 800,000 illegals voted, Mitch McConnell somehow doesn't believe that that warrants a federal investigation. Once again, on a key point, Mitch McConnell chose to protect his progressive buddies rather than the Republic. Shame on you, Mitch. But then again, we expect nothing less from the progressive turtle troll. Former presidential candidate Bernie Sanders called Donald Trump a fraud on the fake news channel CNN in an appearance with Jake Tapper. Sanders accused him of being a fraud over Trump's selection of people he accused of being Wall Street friendly. More quotes from Sanders in the interview. "This guy's a fraud. This guy ran for president of the United States saying, 'I, Donald Trump, I'm going to take on Wall Street. These guys are getting away with murder.' Then suddenly he appoints all these billionaires. He is a good showman, I'll give you that. He's a good TV guy. But I think he's going to sell out the middle class, the working class of this country. It's hard not to laugh to see President Trump alongside these Wall Street guys." Oh, Bernie Sanders, he's a hell of a guy. He's a good guy. He's a great guy. You know, he's the guy who has integrity just oozing out of every pore of his body. This is the guy that when he was running against Hillary Clinton in the Democratic National primary for president in 2016, he accused her of being a Wall Street crony, which she was. He accused her of being corrupt, which she was. And it was exposed through WikiLeaks that Hillary Clinton, the DNC, and the Progressive Party press all colluded to make sure that Bernie Sanders lost and Hillary Clinton won. Yet after all of that, Bernie Sanders immediately did an about-face and totally went full in to support Hillary Clinton. Not only that, but did Bernie Sanders return any of the millions of dollars that his, I guess I'll say his cult-like following gave to him? No, he did not. He chose not to do that. Instead, I'm not saying he didn't use the campaign money for this, but instead, the man of the people, the working man's candidate, what did he do? He bought a second home. Well, yeah, that's what he did. He bought a second home by the beach, because that's who Bernie Sanders is. So when Bernie Sanders calls you a fraud, you should probably consider yourself as a man or woman, whichever the case might be, as you're doing something right. If this guy thinks you're a fraud, you're probably a stand-up guy. Casey Anthony protests Trump presidency. Suspected of murdering her own child, but somehow being acquitted, Casey Anthony found time out of her hiding from public shame day to protest Donald J. Trump. That's right, mothers who may have possibly murdered their own children now support the anti-Trump movement. That will tell you all you need to know about that movement. And now we have a brief clip showing Casey Anthony at the protest.
You've been watching for any amount of time. You can tell the crowd is a lot larger than it was earlier.
Because of the disenfranchisement. We're talking about hanging chads and all this shit.
From NBC 12, Casey Anthony was seen in a protest against President Donald Trump outside his Mar-a-Lago resort Saturday night. Anthony joined a large group of protesters who gathered outside the club Trump has dubbed the Winter White House in Palm Beach, Florida. He is spending the weekend there with family. Anthony was found not guilty of murdering her 2-year-old daughter, Kaylee, in 2011. She has not been seen much in public since the trial ended. So there they are, the anti-Trumpians. Down there, the never-Trumpers, the anti-Trumpians, the whole progressive cabal set to undermine the Trump presidency, gathered outside the quote-unquote the winter White House. And amongst their midst is Casey Anthony, who somehow was found not guilty for what others will argue was a pretty clear-cut and dry case of murder. Murdering her own child. She is justifiably socially shunned, but if you saw the video clip, there's nothing wrong with this girl. Nobody is threatening to punch Casey Anthony in the face. Now, if you're a Trump supporter and you happen to be wearing a hat that says "Make America Great Again," you may get maced in the face like the young woman did during the Berkeley protest. And you may get a company designing a video game called Punch a Nazi, in which they put people like Milo Yiannopoulos, who's a Trump supporter, he's not a Nazi, as one of the people that you could punch in the video game. See, for the anti-Trumpians, if you are, I'm going to say, most likely a murderer, someone who murdered their own child, you're perfectly acceptable. And this isn't really a surprise, given the fact that the Women's March also featured a murderer as one of their speakers, and she's actually a convicted murderer. Congresswoman called Steve Bannon a white supremacist who should legally be removed. She actually also indirectly incited violence as well. Barbara Lee sees Nazis and white supremacists everywhere that progressives aren't, with her latest target being Steve Bannon. Congresswoman calls Steve Bannon a white supremacist who should legally be removed. She actually also indirectly incited violence as well. Barbara Lee sees Nazis and white supremacists everywhere that progressives aren't, with her latest target being Steve Bannon. Democratic Representative Barbara Lee went on Reverend Al Sharpton's MSNBC show to continue to level charges that Steve Bannon, President Trump's closest advisor, is a white supremacist. Well, what a surprise. Progressives calling other people racist and Nazis and white supremacists and bigots. What a surprise! She called him a white supremacist who should be removed from office. Barbara Lee claims that the Congressional Black Caucus, a collection of black supremacists, see how that works, Barbara, is working on figuring out how to legally remove Steve Bannon from the Trump cabinet. And if that doesn't work, she's going to use the heat on the street. We dissect her slanderous rant and Reverend Al's encouragement in the video to follow.
Reverend Al, may I pick up on one appointment in the administration, Steve Bannon? I just wanted to say how dangerous it is to have, as Nancy Pelosi described him, as a white supremacist sitting on the National Security Council.
So, Barbara Lee is going to accuse Steve Bannon of being a white supremacist. That's what they're doing here, folks. They're going to accuse Steve Bannon of being a white supremacist. Folks, this isn't about Steve Bannon being a quote-unquote white supremacist. First of all, he's not. There's nothing white supremacist about this guy. This is about the fact that the progressives know full well that Steve Bannon is a brilliant strategist who means to do nothing short of absolutely destroying the progressives from within and from without. And that is why they are coming at him with such aggression.
Voting rights, human rights.
I'm glad you brought
all
that
of the
up, though,
issues
about Steve Bannon, because twice in Nancy Pelosi, the minority leader of the House, twice in her statement, she referred to Bannon as a white supremacist. twice. And I thought that was very, very, very telling of the attitude of many of his records.
Oh, we've got the Reverend Al. The Reverend Al who can't pronounce the word supremacist. Al, it's supremacist. Please pronounce a word right for the love of everything that's decent. Please try to pronounce the word supremacist as supremacist and not supremacist. Supremacist. You're going to cite Nancy Pelosi as evidence that we should somehow take the charge that Steve Bannon is a white supremacist. Seriously. Nancy Pelosi, this is the woman who said you you have to read the bill after it's passed to find out what's in it. That's the Nancy Pelosi that we're talking about. This is why you lost the election. And I love it that you're going to pursue this line of attack. If you want to call Steve Bannon a white supremacist or supremacist, which I don't know what that means, but if you want to, I'll be very interested to see where that goes. It'll go nowhere. But I'm very happy to see you continue to push this narrative. You guys are helping win votes in 2018, but not for yourselves.
Right now, the public pressure and the street heat, the marches and the protests will help.
Barbara Lee, what do you mean by street heat? Do you mean like in Berkeley, where they appear to have attempted to burn the school down? Is that the kind of street heat that you're talking about? Are you talking about the protests where they're macing Trump supporters in the face? Are you talking about the protest where they're chanting that Donald Trump should be assassinated? Are you talking about those protests? Is that what you're advocating for? Are you a sitting congresswoman that is openly inciting people to violence? Because that's what I think you're doing, and I think that's far more of a legal challenge for you than the fact that Nancy Pelosi has called yet another conservative who opposes her a white supremacist or a Nazi or a right-wing extremist.
What can be done in the Congress to really try and force the president to at least remove him from there if he can't be removed from the White House, other than a bully pulpit?
Right now, we are actually looking at legal ways to approach this in terms of the research we're doing to see if we can find a mechanism to remove him if President Trump does not remove him.
I don't know if this Barbara Lee is aware of the fact that the Democrats do not control the House. They do not control the Senate. They do not control the executive. And soon they will no longer have much power in the judiciary. Be that as it may, one wonders if this is some sort of bluster or threat, that they somehow think that Donald Trump will be like all of the Republican presidents that have come before him, that as soon as the big bad Democrats stand up and threaten some sort of legal action, that Donald Trump and the Republicans will circle the wagons and then point the guns inward at the person that the Democrats are targeting. I don't think that's going to happen in this case, Barbara Lee. I think Stephen Bannon is staying just where he is. And I got to say, I don't know what's going on. I'm not privy to exactly what's going on inside that Trump cabinet, but I've got to say, the fact that these Democrats are going after Steve Bannon with such desperation, with such hate, with such slander, really, accusing this man of being a white supremacist, this tells me that Steve Bannon must be seriously kicking butt, that whatever he's doing to help Trump strategize, because these guys are in it to fight a war. Unlike all the other Republicans that have come before them, they are fighting an all-out war against this cancer that is progressivism in America. And he must be doing a great job, because otherwise I don't think the Democrats will be spending this much time going after this man like they are.
And the more we expose this man and who he is as a white supremacist, his background, Breitbart News, many of the terrible, dangerous statements that he's made, and to see those statements now and his views reflected in our foreign policy, dangerous, it's wrong, it's serious, and we have to find every way we can to make sure that he is removed from the NSC and also from the White House. So we're in the process now of trying to determine if we have some legal mechanisms to really remove him if the president won't.
So I guess Barbara Lee went to the Reverend Al School of English, where supremacist becomes supremacist. Supremacist? It's supremacist, Barbara Lee. Supremacist. Please say it. Please just say supremacist. Now, there she goes repeating the baseless claim that Steve Bannon is a white supremacist based on the horrible statements. What horrible statements? Show me one horrible statement by Steve Bannon that illustrates that he is a white supremacist. You're not going to find it, Barbara Lee, and you know you're not going to find it. Furthermore, show me anything about foreign policy that shows that Steve Bannon is a white supremacist, or anybody else in the Trump administration is a white supremacist. I don't recall any foreign policy decisions that were made based on race, based on a preference of white people. None whatsoever, Barbara Lee. You have legal issues. And honestly, if I were the president, I don't know that I might want to take you to court for. I always confuse, is it libel? Is it slander? What are those? Whichever one it is, that's what you should be sued for. Steve Bannon should sue you. Really, Breitbart, I think that would be the best tactic. Breitbart, because you are bringing down the Breitbart brand with the lies and the slander that you're perpetuating in an official capacity. What you are essentially saying is, if somebody is in your cabinet that is an effective strategist at destroying who we are and exposing the cancer that we are, we have to somehow remove them. And you're going to do this by any means necessary. Isn't that right, Barbara Lee? The inciter to violence. You cited heat on the street. Heat on the street. You're going to set fires on the street? Is that what you're going to do, Barbara Lee? You just had that Berkeley protest, and you're referring to all those types of protests as being good ways to get rid of Steve Bannon. Who are the Nazis, Barbara Lee? Who are the fascists?
Thank you for joining us on this Trump Revolution Report, bringing you daily news of the Trump Revolution, featuring Ivo Fisick, your underground revolutionary reporter. Join us tomorrow for another edition of the Trump Revolution Report from TrumpRevolutionUSA.com. Find out more about the Trump Revolution and be sure you join the fight at join.TrumpRevolutionUSA.com. To keep track of our latest videos, go to video.TrumpRevolutionUSA.com. And to keep track of the latest news, go to news.TrumpRevolutionUSA.com.